Hello, I'm Jeremy Wright, the Associate Pastor of the Westside Missionary Baptist Church. Now I'm recording this video, it probably won't go up today, but I'm recording this video on the day after the election. That's not decided yet, and probably won't be decided for who knows how long, I don't know. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about Ruth, which has nothing to do with politics at all. We're not really going to talk about politics much here, but we will talk about politics if you watch these for the politics, then there will be politics in it. So with this election going on, the important thing to note is that elections have to be legitimate through, if there's cheating and stuff, then it won't be legitimate. And that's what's going on right now. And they need to, and I want everybody that listens to me, bear with this process, because Donald Trump is going to have to sue people. He's going to have to sue these states, and he's going to have to make these recounts happen. He's going to have to force them to go to the court and look at what happened. They're going to have to do it because there are more votes than what are they called? Oh my goodness. I know all the time. I've said this like a dozen times today. There are more votes than registered voters in Wisconsin. They found something like 27,000 ballots and they were all Biden's. Where did they find them? It doesn't make sense. They're kind of being they're hiding what they're doing, and there's a lot of stuff like that that's going on. Now, while we're thinking about this thing, we need to understand that politics is politics. Now, politics means it comes from public. So it's the affairs of the public. So in the public, we do things. And how that has to be regulated by laws. It has to be. But there's another thing that is involved in this called culture. And we have a culture. That's what people do. That's what's popular. You ever heard pop culture? That's popular culture. When they say pop music, they mean the popular music. So it could be any music, actually. But pop music is usually a certain kind of thing. And the culture is very important. Now, I don't have the means financially to put up my own Facebook, to put up my own YouTube, to put up any of that stuff. But the means I have, I'm using. I have a camera, and I have what I know, and I'm going to put that into YouTube. Hopefully people watch it and things like that. But we do have to start fighting in the culture. Now, the reason we're going to talk about Ruth is a very interesting book of the Bible. We just had a lesson on it in our 52 Bible lessons where we answered questions. It's very short. You can read it. It's 3 pages. 4 pages. It's 4 pages in your Bible. 4 chapters, 4 pages. So, you could read it real quick, and you know it. So there's a man named, Elimelech, and his wife, Naomi, and they go to Moab from Israel because there's a famine in Israel. And they get there, and this is a different place than where they live. This is a different culture. This is a different society. These are the Moabites. And their children, the husband dies, and Ruth's children get married to, Naomi's children get married to Ruth and Ophrah. I don't know exactly. It's O-R-P-A-H, but these are translated from Hebrew words, so how they actually pronounced it, we have no idea. And they go out, and then Naomi decides that she's had enough there. She's heard there's bread in Israel, and the famine's over, there's food there. She's going to go back home, which they're from Bethlehem. Pretty interesting. There's some other people from Bethlehem that we'll talk about in a minute. Now, Naomi, when she goes back, her daughter-in-laws, these are the 2 daughters, this Ophrah and Ruth, who married her sons, they want to go with her to Israel. And she begins to talk them out of it. So we'll read some of this here in a verse, if I can find the right spot here. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters, this is verse 8 of Ruth chapter 1. Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, Go return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you as ye have dealt with the dead and with me. So she tells them to go back home to your mother. Now we'll notice that Naomi has such a great relationship with these girls that they don't want to leave. And it says in the next verse, near the end of it, it says, and they lifted up their voice and wept. So they wept because they didn't want to leave Naomi. Pretty interesting. And they said unto her, Surely we will return with thee unto thy people. And this is in verse 10. And Naomi said, Turn again, my daughters, why will you go with me? And are there yet any more sons in my womb that they may be your husbands? And she goes on to talk about this more and more and more about how she's not going to have any more children. And even if she did have more children, you're going to wait till they become adults. No, you're not going to do that. You're going to go out and get your own husband. So then why would you do this? And they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave unto her. And she said, behold, this is in verse 15. This is what we're going to talk about. And she said, behold, thy sister-in-law is gone, back unto her people and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. Now, verse 15, I'm sorry. This always strikes me. She's returned unto her gods. Her gods. Now, I'm pretty sure they're talking about false gods here because Moab probably had false gods. Now, my little note here is my God is king, but that's not what it's talking about here. Maybe I looked at the wrong one. Yeah, this just tells me where another one is. So, this is the saddest part of this story to me. Even though there's death and there's other things. She's going to return back to these false gods. She's going to return back to this godless culture. To this culture of false gods. That's bad. That's a bad thing. Now, what we need to do in America is we need to quit going to this godless culture, or like I like to call this false god culture. There is a false god in America, and that false god is called science. So the Americans and the elites, as you call them, they have invented this false god called science. And their prophet is Darwin. And some of these other speakers, but Darwin is their great prophet. And I have said a few times, I don't believe in evolution at all. I think it's nonsense. It's the Big Bang Theory is enough to get me to say, nope, not listening to you. That's silly. If you started there, no one would ever listen to you go on. They don't start there, though. They get you all tied into evolution over here. They start with something like the geological column. And they say, see, the geological column. What about radiometric dating? Which could be falsified very easily. They radiometrically dated the same thing. They did it on the same thing. Like they radiometric a foot and then they radiometric a head of the same creature, and they get two different readings, thousands and thousands of years separated. That's not a system you can use to make any sense. So what they do is they say, well, if it's in this strata, in the geologic column, which exists in its entirety nowhere on Earth except for in textbooks. So they've invented this false god, science. And that's their false god, science. And they'll claim it. One of these guys running for president, Joe Biden, said, science knows. Science can't know things. Science has no knowledge. Science is only, it's a study of things. It's a way of testing things, the scientific method. Science comes from a word that means knowledge. So science is knowledge. It doesn't know things. It doesn't act. It has no will. Science doesn't have a will. But God has a will. So here as we go on, we're going to see what Ruth's reaction to this is. Now, remember, going back to her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. And in verse 16, and this is very famous. And Ruth said, entreat me not to leave thee. That means don't ask me to leave. Or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go. And whither thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. Naomi, even though she's going to go in the next verse, she's going to talk about how there's mistakes she made, how she did the wrong thing by leaving Israel, by going to Moab and leaving her home and leaving her place where she was supposed to serve God to this other place, this other culture, this false god culture that they had. And we see something very important. She had such an influence on Ruth that Ruth would not leave her. Ruth has a mother somewhere. Maybe a father somewhere too. Maybe they're both still alive. Maybe her father and her mother are right around the corner, and she's, no, I'm going with you. Your God's going to be my God. I'm not going to serve these false gods anymore. Where you die, I'm going to die. I'm going to be buried where you're buried. She's become her daughter more than her daughter-in-law, right? It's pretty amazing stuff. So, the problem we have in the United States is cultural, and religious. So if you can make it like if it's a river, you got a river going down. You just got this river going, and up here, you've got religion, culture, politics. Right? They all feed into each other. Culture comes from the same word a cult comes from. Cult, like a cult following or those kind of things. So these are the things that are popular. Religion feeds into it, but we are trying to get rid of religion. And they want to have this secular science culture in America, and that's just stupid, foolish, and it will only lead to ruin. What we need to do as Christians is go out and spread the gospel. Now, this election has been rough because there's a group of people that hate a man. There's a group of people, the Democrats, the left, they hate a man because of what he did, what he does. They say it's because of what he says, but it's not true. You see, they're fooling you. They're tricking you into thinking they hate the man for his policies, but they don't. For his rhetoric, but they don't. They hate the man for his policies. Now, this is the thing. Remember back in your mind, if you can, if you were around for this, remember what they said about George W. Bush. They called him Hitler. They called him a Nazi. They called him a racist. What did they say about Mitt Romney? Mitt Romney was a sexist, right? He was a misogynist. He was a racist. He was all these terrible things. He was going to take away all your support systems. He was going to make sure that you couldn't survive. He was going to push Granny off of a cliff. Terrible stuff like that. What they say about John McCain, who they loved right before he died, but when he was running for president, how'd they think about him? And they hated him. I heard people say, I just want to see him raise his arms up above his shoulders. It's like, he was in a plane crash, serving our country, in a war, kept he was in a prisoner of war for a long time. So, these are pretty nasty things to say. Now, they talk about how nasty Trump is sometimes, but have you heard the stuff Biden says? He's pretty nasty. Have you heard what was her name? Maxine Waters said? This is a little while back. Maxine Waters said, if you see any of these people from this administration, the Trump administration, you get in their face, and you cause a scene, and you yell at them, and you make them have problems. They threw Sarah Huckabee Sanders, she was the press secretary for Donald Trump, they threw her out of a restaurant. They all came and swarmed her and chased her out of a restaurant. Does that sound like, doesn't that sound nasty? They knock out the windows in buildings and they burn places down, and they do all of this evil because their culture is evil. Their way of living is evil. In Portland, they have decriminalized small amounts, personal use amounts of heroin, methamphetamines, and cocaine. It's kind of weird. Why would you decriminalize these hard, dangerous drugs like heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines? Interesting. So when they were saying, oh, it's just marijuana. We only want marijuana. That's all we want. Just, marijuana. It's just a plant. It's just a plant. Where do you get cocaine from? Don't you get it from a plant? I don't know where heroin comes from. It comes from something that exists in nature, because everything comes from stuff that exists in nature. We just put them together, right? This camera that I'm talking to, this table, that chair, all of those things are found in nature, and we just build them into things. Like your phone, these cell phones that we carry around. All the components of this, you can find them in nature if you take it down to its base pieces, to the smallest parts of it. Some of them have the wiring's made out of copper, sometimes gold, because it carries electricity better. So everything comes from nature. You can say that about anything. Alligators are natural, right? Why don't you go give an alligator a hug? Lions are natural. Well, cottonmouth snakes. Cottonmouth. We have cottonmouths down here in Florida. They're natural. Why don't you go pet one of them? What's going to happen to you? You're going to be bit by a cottonmouth, then you're going to die. Black mambas are natural. A lot of dangerous things are natural. Just because something's natural doesn't mean it's safe. That's a silly thing to think. Hurricanes are natural, and we wouldn't call them safe. We live in Florida. It's not the hurricane that scares us in Florida. You know what it is? It's the 2 weeks after the hurricane where you don't have any power and it's like 95 degrees and you're sitting there like, oh my gosh, it's so hot. It's that stuff that we don't like. So all these natural things are dangerous. That is a bad culture. That's the culture. Oregon, That's close to the culture, Washington and all that area where they led in that Chaz Shop place and those riots and the nonsense. And people telling me they're mostly peaceful. Well, if I punch you in the face after an hour-long conversation where I don't punch you in the face, was that a mostly peaceful interaction? Is that mostly peaceful or is that violent? Of course it's violent. So we see here, this is the thing that makes me sad in here, is this Ophrah. Ruth, this book's about Ruth. This is a you should read Ruth. It's interesting. It's kind of a love story. And this Ophrah, however you say it, she goes back to the bad culture. Whereas Ruth comes to the good culture. Naomi leads this woman away from this false god culture. And that's a good thing. That's a wonderful thing. What we need to do in America is we need to leave the culture of the false god of science. Understand this. This is very important. You will worship something. You might think, no, I'm an atheist. I don't worship anything. No. You will worship something. The atheists worship science or themselves. Humanists worship themselves. Naturalists worship nature. And then they say, no. It's only things that you can see that happen. Can you see a thought? I bet you can't see my thoughts. Interesting, right? They're not real then, right? According to a naturalist, thoughts aren't real. So there you go. Boom. Naturalists, you've been defeated in this argument here. I got an argument with somebody about the election, a couple people. And I handily won one of those arguments. But I guess, I don't know. Because the guy agreed with me at the end. I think he was being sarcastic, so that's fine. But it was public. I did it right in the comments. I remember my daughter was having a comment. She her aunt posted something and she wanted something. So she sent her a private message on Facebook saying, hey, if you're going to get rid of that, I want it. And then she's like, oh, no, I'm not going to get rid of it. And I said, you should do that in the comments. And we'll get a little further in this because I don't really care if they get mad at me. They're already mad at me. So I can't make them any madder. The left got mad at the writer of Harry Potter. I forgot her name. What is her name? I don't know. Somebody knows it. I don't care about Harry Potter that much. It's just a story. I watched the movies. I didn't read the books. But they got mad. The left got really mad at her because she decided that women are women. And they really hate this. She's like, women are women. And men aren't women. And you can't change from a man into a woman just because you want to. And it's like, well, yeah, that's true. So they got real mad at her. And now, you know what they say? Well, Harry Potter is not yours. It's everybody's. It's ours as much as it's yours. Well, if that's true, then Disney owes me something for what they did to Star Wars, because they really ruined Star Wars with their nonsense. And, maybe other people too, but definitely them. And but that's not how it works. If you have a thought and you lay it down and you make a story, that's your story. I'm sorry. It's not. Star Wars is not my story. It's George Lucas's story, and then he sold it to Disney, so now it's Disney's story. You see how that works? Well, Harry Potter is not your story. It's her story. She told him. And if she wants to think that women are women, then, well, welcome to the club. Everybody does. And everybody who says they don't is lying. They're just telling you a false thing. They're trying to build this culture around their god of science, but they got this one thing stuck in there. Well, how do we make this fit? How do we make this non-science thing fit? Well, nobody knows science anyway, so we'll just tell them it fits. And then they call me a hater. I'm a transphobe because I think that women are women. Well, that's what they did to this poor lady, whose name I know every other minute, but right now. And I can't remember her name right now. So that's kind of funny. Maybe my researcher over here will look it up. And so we have these... So they were going to get rid of, well, man, these Harry Potter, the writer's so terrible, I think I should get rid of the books. Well, there you go. My daughter's like, I want those books. Should I send her a message about it? I'm like, yeah. But I meant comment publicly. This is what I want you guys to do. Those of you who are Christians that are listening to me and you want to understand how to do these things, how to debate with somebody. If you're doing it on Facebook, do it in the comments. Don't do it in a private messenger. Do it in the comments. That way everybody sees it. She's looked up the name here, so she's going to tell me. What was the name? J.K. Rowling. See, I knew that every other day. J.K. Rowling. And, J.K. Rowling even capitulated to them once and decided that Dumbledore was gay. which is none of that's in the movies. It's like they don't show it to you, but he was. Yeah, it's written in there. You just can't tell. So, which is fine if that's what she wants to do. It's her story, like I said. I don't have to argue with every single thing everybody does because I don't really care. I'm gonna go. I don't know what Sylvester Stallone's personal life is like, but I love the Rocky movies. So I don't care what his personal life's like. Those movies are good, and that's true of a lot of things. You can watch movies. Be careful. Little eyes, what you see. Be careful, little ears, what you hear. Remember that, because the Father above is looking down with love. So be careful. Careful what you see, what you listen to, what you take in. But if you're, strong enough, you understand enough, then you should be able to watch a movie and not be destroyed by it. But some movies are there to destroy your Christianity. We need to be like Ruth and go after the good culture, and not like poor Ophrah, who went after the bad culture. She went off to the culture that's no good. We need to go after the good culture. And you know where you're going to find the good culture? You know where you're going to figure out what's good? From the Bible. Because the Bible teaches what's good. And it'll teach that sometimes by showing you what's bad. David was a great king, called a man after God's own heart, but he did things that were wrong, and the Bible didn't leave it out. If David had wrote it, he'd probably say, this little part about Bathsheba and Uriah, let's not put that in there. But he didn't write it. And so it got put in there so that we could know that David did things that were wrong and learn from them and not do the wrong things that they did. They're an example for us. There's a better culture. The Bible says, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. So we're not supposed to be like the world. But does the world have to be this bad? Maybe, probably, eventually. Is it the end of this country, though? Let's say all of our great fears are realized and Joe Biden becomes the 46th president of the United States, and then Kamala Harris becomes the 47th president of the United States, because Joe Biden just does not seem like he's with it. He was talking about his dead son being elected senator in Pennsylvania or something, which he never was when he was alive either. So Biden, and it's a sad thing. Somebody should just step in there and say, listen, there's something wrong with you. We need to take you over here to a doctor and have a doctor check this out. And we need to not have you on stage every day talking to people. How is he going to deal with foreign powers? Oh my goodness, it's just going to be a mess. So, I don't know. I don't know how anybody could have voted for the man, but people did. All of California practically. I looked at the numbers there. So many people in California. California is the worst part of our culture. Probably the best part of our culture is somewhere in the middle. I don't know where. Somewhere in the middle. Florida has a lot of California and a lot of New York in it. Some New Jersey too. I know some people from New Jersey. But don't worry, I have converted them. They have, not me. God's converted them. I was just there when it happened, and that's all you can be. Is there when it happened. I got a little activist in my house that goes to work and campaigns for Donald Trump and for the Republicans. Now, the reason we vote for the Republicans is because they're closer to what we want the country to be. But we're never going to get anywhere, because the left, we win an election, we lose an election, we win an election, we lose an election. It seems like every 8 years you got the different kind of president. We're actually ahead right now, the Republicans. So I think we're owed a back turn eventually, I guess. I don't know. But while we were doing that, the left took over the culture. I'm looking at a map of the United States right now. There's over on my wall. And you can see the country. And if you look at the country, you will notice that during these elections, it's all red, except for just a few places. So the country's really red. It's just these places where a lot of people gather together and live that swing some of these elections. But if we start taking the culture back and leading people away from the wickedness of the world and towards the righteousness of God, that's what we should do. Now, am I sitting here saying that Naomi did the wrong thing by sending her daughter-in-laws back home? She didn't think she was, for sure. But Ruth, by staying with her, we know definitely she did the right thing, and we know that because if we read the very last bit of the book of Ruth, this is chapter 4. So there's only 4 verses. Verses 21 and 22. Well, I'll tell you this. Ruth marries a guy named Boaz. Boaz has a child with Ruth named Obed. Obed has a child named Jesse, and Jesse has a child named David. David, yes, that David, the second king of Israel. A man after God's own heart. That's pretty amazing. It's an amazing thing. Now, out of David's line, and it talks about this, the throne of David is where Jesus will sit when he comes back. So Ruth, by doing the right thing, by going to where God was, going to God and his ways, and saying, your God will be my God, we get David. And from David, it even talks about from the stem of Jesse, you're going to have Jesus. Jesus is going to come out of the line of David. From Abraham to David to Jesus. And Jesus comes out of the line, and Jesus saves us all. Now, I know that before Abraham was, I am. Jesus says that. Meaning that before Abraham even existed, Jesus is. Not was, is. Because he's God. And he uses Ruth to do this wonderful thing, to bring Jesus into the world. He uses Ruth to bring in Ruth is the great-grandmother of David, which is an amazing thing. We need to understand that the actions we take have consequences. If I go out and I win 3 people to the Lord, that's 3 people that don't go to hell, they go to heaven. What if they win 3 people to the Lord each? Well, now how many is that? That's 3, 6, 9 people? And what if they all lead 3? What if they all just lead 1? That's, 3 more. And then those 3, which is now, your numbers keep increasing. Keep increasing. If they all lead 2, we keep growing that way. What you need to do is you need to leave this desperate world. Desperate coming from the word despair. Despair meaning hopeless. And the world's hopeless without God. Science is a hopeless thing. Science is a hopeless thing. But God will accept you if you trust Jesus as your Savior. God will take you out of that misery that you live in and give you joy. Now, things are going to go up and down. If Biden gets elected, I'm not going to be happy about it. But I have joy. Tomorrow, I'll be fine. I'll be the same person I am now. I'll be happy, and I'll be sad, and I'll be happy, and I'll be sad, but I'll have joy. Always. If you're sitting somewhere today and you think no one cares about you, Jesus cares about you. If you're sitting somewhere today and you're thinking it's hopeless, Jesus will give you hope. If you're sitting somewhere today and you're thinking no one accepts me anywhere, we will accept you at this church because Jesus accepts you. We sing a song, Just As I Am. You can only come to Jesus just as you are, and then He'll change you. But you can't come to Jesus any other way. We need to take this culture back. We need to take it back with the Bible. We need to make it a biblical culture again. We need to make God paramount in our culture. That's why I voted for Donald Trump, because he talks like that's what he wants to do. He wants to bring God back to our culture. I don't know what's going to happen with this election, but hopefully Donald Trump wins. If not, you have to live as a Christian anyways, no matter what happens in the world. I'm Jeremy Wright, the Associate Pastor of the Westside Missionary Baptist Church. Remember, Jesus accepts you as you are, and it makes you better. And don't you want to be better? Like, comment, and subscribe. It's very important that you do that, because then you'll see all my videos. And they're only going to get better from here, because I'm going to sleep more than I did the last few nights. And then there'll be better videos. Alright, so have a good night. We'll see you next time.